Chill here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Moon Hour, Mercury Day, Moon is 2020 in Capricorn, Saturn with the midheaven, ruled by Mars Sedna, and Ascendant Procyon conjoining retrograde Mercury. Now, you're probably thinking, what is going over the person that decided to record an episode right now? Let me tell you exactly what I'm using this particular election for. Um, it's not news that there is a technological boom. And it's not news that those that are currently invested in it came from the 30 million PDF file list. Um, about that, I'm not concerned. I've been seeing the setup for the pedo ringers, which is basically the setup for the guillotine life. Now, people that were born into those lineages and didn't have a way to exit violence or even a way to recover. I myself ran into what happens when a person seeks help or seeks therapy and they harm them there. But so that there would be an alternative, the only type of structured, and this is the role of Saturn here, structured wealth or building foundations that can stand the test of time is the use of AI to abolish human trafficking or have a human trafficking free zone. Do I know how to do it? Absolutely not. This is why I need the people that do know how to do it. I can learn coding, but it takes more than coding. Definitely is building a sovereign country, but it also has to work within the international arena that was governed by the PDF file ring. And I actually remember having conversations in the ether, so to speak, on that very topic. I said, well, what if there is zone etat for the etat is an alternative too? And that was interesting. It was interesting, and the question is how to do it. There is the question of energy sovereignty, which is way more possible than we can imagine. Um, the cultural issue, the fact that the children of the elite were sent to schools where only some of them came back alive, and that was normalized. Okay, thanks to people like Anneke Lucas. And I'm not talking about the expendable children or the atrocities. The expendable children were possible because the elite normalized the fact that some of their children might not return from the training or the boot camps, and they just saw it as a superhuman structure. Just like the sexual boundary violation of women is only allowed because the boys at the secret societies are wed to men that were also raped. So, and they can't, and all of them are threatened when they try to speak about that. And then it makes it impossible for a man to be a competent man, a successful man, a thriving man, a happily in love man with a man or with a woman, even after LGBTQ rights. Um, and then, indeed, when these men are raped in infanthood or in childhood, they are seen as the feminine, and it happens to girls too. And it affects people that are not even physically there, particularly infants and children, and a lot of them are later seen as atypical or neurodivergent or autistic or high functioning autistic. or not high functioning autistic. Um, there's a lot of challenges. The promises of big wealth by big depth or and investing into the booming, the current boom, which is AI boom. Um, well, let me tell you about an economist in Israel that made decisions for quite some companies, and I probably wouldn't agree with everything he did, and I don't know if he raped girls in Thailand, okay, or even if he was in Epstein list. Um, that particular decision, when everybody was high tech booming, he was keeping it solid and not going into the high tech boom, and made decisions that sustained the subprime. Now, it wasn't difficult to make decisions that sustained the subprime as an economist. You simply had to not go by the lowering of the interest and not invest in things on the basis of lowering the interest. And I think this would be relevant also for contemporary times. And I dare say, even if your loan promises you to be fixed, um, the banks can be confiscated. In fact, the trajectory with Chiron in Taurus is to be confiscated. Good things, bad things, who know, but this is at least a trajectory that we are not able to rely on a bank, not just by investments, but also by taking a loan. Because what happens when the bank is confiscated? If you took a loan to buy a house, the house could be confiscated. Now, of course, usually at emergency loans, and we have been having an abundance of them since 2020. This year was likened to 2020. 2027 was likened to 2020. And this is why a lot of people are going for a high-tech boom or resources boom. Those things entail certain things that, let's just say, if you could ask a Peter Ringer, they would probably tell you to be cautious of, because it means an extortion, a web of extortion that essentially is designed to extort people to commit genocide, democides, crime against humanity, and then either be exposed as PDF files or be exposed as criminal against humanity, or both. That's the onset. That's what's behind the bubble, and that bubble is created by kidnaps, lots of drugs, lots of torture that was prepared since infanthood, and gatekeeping, recovery. The only way to surf that wave of IA boom, the financial wave as well, is to use the AI to abolish trafficking and rape, knowing that, notwithstanding that, we're not talking about independent organizations, we're talking about a conglomerate that is very global. Okay, and that is important. That is the challenge that stands in the face of AI investors and developers. People that have made wealth, housing. Usually when we talk about wealth, it's about, oh, have the children have, I don't know, studies or a home, and their children also have something saved in the bank and a trajectory. But a high-tech boom is not a trajectory unless you build something that stands the test of time. Okay? Most of the things that were built around the internet, if you think about social media was not profitable. YouTube is not profitable. This is why we have a lot of problems with social media to do with things that are not so legal, let's say, towards the users and the content creators. Okay, it was an unprofitable um, business, or that made a pact with selling data, and then the people weren't stupid as expected. And that was the high-tech boom. That and the opening of the industries like the film industry and the music industry to no longer being profitable when they're standing on the rocky foundations of whatever happens at Disney. Okay, um, and then for the artists to actually make money from art, they have to denounce the thing that they can't talk about. That is not an esoteric, tiny thing, but rather a global one. Um, those that were thinking to get in, we saw it also with the natural resources, countries where they discovered gas or oil. Um, those infrastructures are interlinked with extortion cults, to be particular. And the people that get into that without a strong infrastructure of abolishing rape, trafficking, also in the occult, are basically setting themselves to be the next PDF file list. And there's a lot that goes with that, also in between exposures. Um, okay, basically they're harmed as well, is what I'm saying. Whether they're dissociated or remember. And remember, in Sedna's story, everybody had to appease Sedna. Whatever they thought about her, she's too picky, she's too this, she's too that. Essentially, she just said no to rape. And the entire village learned that with famine. Um, now, what the village is global, then we see it on a global village level that no wealth can sustain. And what does sustain is something that is, let's just say it's a bubble that pops, and when it pops, all the abuse that the person went through that was related to making them a so-called profiting of is rising to the surface. Um, and you can see it. You can see it with people that are writing about watering down the ring. in their own businesses, or um, and then the memories of them being abused come to the surface, and the thought that they would profit off of their abuse. Um, it's about ending the abuse. Now, this is a time where gas infrastructures are bombed. And gas infrastructures is even easier than oil, because for oil we need nuke. Pluto, Pluto. For gas, we need explosion. Uranus, Uranus. Of course, in the middle is Neptune, which is radiation or waves of polluted air. Okay, in Russia, the gas infrastructures and the oil infrastructures were bombed, and also in Ukraine, family lost entire wealth. Families that made big wealth, or that made a big boom around maybe owning a gas station, or the gas station network. And in general, investing in gas is Uranus. Uranus is very volatile investment. Oil is Pluto. It runs slower, but it's correlated with nuke, and nuke is correlated with very taboo things to do with infants and fertility. Laser is a wave, that's Neptune. Again, very taboo things to do with infants, and dissociation of the infant, psychiatric diseases, neurodivergence in the lineage, neurodegenerative diseases in the lineage. Okay, these are now. What's the antidote? When Neptune is in Aries, abolish rape. When Pluto is in Aquarius, wealth redistribution, but then make sure never to override sexual boundaries. Now, here is the thing: usually the wealth begins in those societies with overriding sexual boundaries, because that's the onset of the extortion. It is also how the mind control is working. Um, and that prevents peace. The thoughts about peace as water dependency, for example, in the Middle East, were not bad thoughts, but for water dependency, element of water need to be clear, and it cannot be clear with emotional abuse, psychological abuse, or sexual abuse. Even transactional relationships are also abuse on the body. Okay, self-pleasure that is not embodied and honoring the yes, no, and maybe of the body physically, emotionally, and spiritually is already a violation that negates water dependency based peace and infrastructure. And I was an apprentice at the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce at the time where they were thinking to enact water dependency. Was the idea of Tshuva. I did not meet Tshuva personally, but the Paris Peace Center, all was centered around that. And even Moshe Dayan, that thought to live with the Arabs and to change the relation of living with the Arabs. There's residues of that we see in the intelligence. They got a Syrian bear as a gift, but because it's still violating the feminine. It's not just women. We know about the women that Moshe Dayan raped. We don't know how many men. Okay, and probably a lot of men were raped in Israel. Then they see a person from Israel, they see a Nazi, and it's all because of these things that preceded 7th of October. Now, of course, we're in other countries where the militarism begins to build up, Moshe Dayans are beginning to build up, and that is meaning that they're going to be seen as the Nazis. And okay, so conscious Moshe Dayan wanted to live with the Arabs, but you know, and that's why it didn't work. That's why we had 67. I'm reading a book about all the maneuvers, the wits, the understanding that, oh, they're going to attack us anyway, so let's make it look like they did. War in three frontiers, knowing that they can't rely on the U.S. It's not something that's not relevant for for our times. U.S. looks at the area and it sees New Egypt. Okay, every empire looks at the area and it sees another promised land. The people in those promised land are, how should I say that? They're numbers on a board. How do we treat numbers on a board? I walk around any city that is peripheral in Israel that hasn't been completely bombed just yet. I see US, Ultra, MK Ultra South, US. I saw MK Ultra South in the central Israel. It means that the center is the south. If I want to travel by train, I'd rather not go too far away from, let's say, Haifa, maybe Pardes Chana, because norther than that is already no man's land. And people weren't evacuated to hotels in central Israel because they're already occupied by the people in the south that were evacuated 7th of October. Maui. Now, meanwhile, people talk about land redemption and a war in all three fronts. We had 67. 67 was a setup. Why? Because a society that rapes the boys will inevitably not be a society women can live with it in peace. Will inevitably not hold to the feminine land with dignity. Will inevitably lose the feminine, children, women, lower ranks, people, and land, and land, and land, and land, and land. אוקיי, אני תכף יוצאת. To who? To those that will best abolish rape, trafficking, and so on and so forth, even in the secret society on a global scale.